Hi, everyone. This is Right to Life of Central California Executive Director John Gerardi, bringing you another in our 40 Videos for 40 Days series. We're doing this in conjunction with 40 Days for Life, the international campaign of prayer and presence outside abortion clinics throughout the country and throughout the world. If you want to learn more about our campaign in Fresno, get in touch with us at 559-229-2229. Today on the show, we're talking a little bit more about the development of Christian teaching on the topic of abortion. We're doing this to sort of combat modern efforts by pro-choice advocates to argue that a pro-choice position is consistent with historical Christian teaching on the topic of abortion. We discussed the opposition of the Christian church in very early times in the first century in the ancient world, their opposition to abortion then, the opposition of Christianity for most of its history afterwards, even though people weren't exactly sure when life began in the womb. Nobody ever thought abortion was morally okay. They thought it was either an immoral form of contraception or an immoral form of late contraception or an immoral form of very early homicide. Either way, the Christian church was not okay with it. We now get into the 19th century, which represents a big development in Christian teaching on the topic of abortion, but a development that's in continuity with the whole prior tradition. And a development that was in response to new scientific discoveries. It was only in the 19th century that scientists conclusively demonstrated when mammalian life begins. When a mammal's egg cell and a mammal's sperm cell meet, they form a new organism, a new living organism, independent of mom and dad, composed of biological material from mom and dad, but a new organism working towards its own growth, its own metabolism, etc. This was only around in the 1820s that this was conclusively demonstrated. Now, when that was demonstrated, this resulted in public policy changes in American law and some big doctrinal clarifications from certain Christian bodies. And some of these went hand in hand. Dr. Horatio Storer, who was the head of the American Medical Association, led a massive drive during the 19th century to encourage American states, in light of this new evidence that abortion is actually the taking of a new living human organism, encouraged a bunch of American states to outlaw abortion, to actually pass laws conclusively, explicitly, decisively outlawing the practice of abortion. Some states from the common law tradition that they had inherited from England looked disfavorably on the practice of abortion, but it wasn't really clarified in statute. Dr. Storer, received a lot of public support to pass laws in various American states to define abortion as a crime, as a form of homicide, in response to this new information. You also saw different religious bodies take a sterner stance against abortion because, as I said in the last lecture, nobody really knew exactly when human life began in the womb. The best scientific guess we had was from the 4th century BC, Aristotle, who thought maybe life begins in the womb 40 days after conception, maybe like 80 days after conception. Some people thought quickening, when the mother can start to feel her baby moving in her womb. They thought that maybe that was a significant moment when life began, but no one was really sure. Once we learned conclusively that human life begins at conception, this precipitated certain Christian groups clarifying their opposition to abortion from being opposition to abortion as a form of late contraception to opposition to abortion as a form of homicide. Pope Pius IX, who was Pope during much of the mid to late 19th century, issued certain changes in Catholic canon law defining the act of abortion as homicide and clarifying that any Catholic who participated in this would be subject, under certain conditions and certain kinds of persons, would be subject to the penalty known as excommunication, basically not able to receive any of the sacraments of the church, Holy Communion, even go to confession, without being reconciled with one of the church's ministers. A lot of pro-choice advocates for example, Catholics for Choice, will try to make the argument that Pius IX changed the church's teaching when it comes to abortion. Really, he didn't. The Catholic Church was always very consistent. You cannot kill living members of the human family. The church was also pretty consistent that abortion was wrong. They just were not sure what kind of wrong it was. Is this a late form of contraception, or is this an early form of homicide? What Pius IX did was really respond to modern advances in the science of his age and clarify the teaching of the church in light of these new scientific discoveries. Now that we know that life begins at conception, Pius IX clarified that we cannot deliberately take the life of any living human organism, including someone who's very, very small and underdeveloped. So I don't see here, Catholics for Choice will try to say this is a decisive change or break in the historic teaching of Christianity. So you can still be an authentic Christian, an authentic Catholic, and believe that abortion is okay. But it's such a complete rewriting of the history of the Catholic Church or of Christianity more generally to try to argue that in any way support for legal abortion is consistent with historic Christianity. For Right to Life of Central California, I'm John Gerardi.